Hello, welcome to this podcast. This is a part of the Ethiopia Insight's election project covering Ethiopia's 2021 general elections. I'm Martha Kuwe Kumsa. Today, I will be talking with Ermias Tasfaye. Ermias has published an in-depth article titled Prosperity Parties Win is a Loss for Oromia and Ethiopia. It was published on August 19, 2021, and you can read it on the website of Ethiopia Insight. Ermias is an Ethiopia Insight reporter and administrator. He's based in Burayu town in Oromia. He also does research and translation work. Ermias, congratulations on crafting and publishing such an incredibly powerful and beautifully written article.
Thank you, Professor Martha.
Would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself so listeners to get to know you, Ermias?
Thank you again. I'm Ermias, and I'm an admin for Ethiopia Insight and reporter focusing on Oromia. I also do research analysis for several international institutions on freelance basis. Before I started reporting for Ethiopia Insight in 2018, I worked as a freelance translator and fixer for foreign journalists and institutions for years.
All right, that's wonderful. So thank you so much for filling us on those details. So coming back to your election article in Ethiopia Insight, your title itself says a lot. Prosperity Parties Win is a loss for Oromia and Ethiopia. That's a powerful statement. I hope we will break it down through our conversation. So, what's happening in Oromia?
To understand what is going on in Oromia, one should at least review the main events that took place in Oromia since 2015 general election. The Oromo protest, appearance and ascension of a group from OPDO speaking a language of Oromo protesters. One should also examine the underlying cause for this protest, because the protest erupted months after the ruling party declared victory. So the main reason behind the Oromo protest was the historical marginalization of Oromo people as a nation, which goes back to the formation of the modern Ethiopia. The accumulated grievance of the Oromo people as a nation is also another cause for the Oromo protests, though the plan to expand Addis Ababa into surrounding Oromia towns triggered the protest. The Oromo people struggled for justice and equality, for being recognized as a nation, for ownership rights, human rights, which they were denied under successive regimes for a long time, is another underlying cause for the eruption of the Oromo protest back in 2015. So what we have to see here is that the cause for the grievance of the Oromo people was they were marginalized and treated as inferior under successive Ethiopian regimes. So after mid-2016, meaning while the Oromo protest was on its highest peak, the group came out from the OPDO, the ruling party that the Oromos were fighting against. And they started appearing as supporters of the protesters and speaking out on their behalf. So after they gradually gained support from the people, they started acting as sole saviors of the Oromo people. When we come to the current situation, by the end of 2016, Abiy joined the group and started motivating and praising Oromo people for protesting against his party. Back then, he started by promising the people that he would work day and night to address their demands. Before joining the group, he had no popularity in Oromia because he had never served in the region. But after he was removed from the Ministry of Science by Haile Mariam Desalegn, his predecessor, he was appointed as a cabinet member of Oromia region. Back then, apart from some government officials, nobody knows about who he was. Even no one seemed to care about why he was removed from the Ministry of Science, along with other ministers, mostly members of TPLF, when Haile Mariam appointed several new Oromo ministers in order to appease Oromo protesters. Until the time he became the prime minister, Abiy continued pleasing the Oromo people with his charismatic pledges. He pledged to remove exiled political parties from the terrorist list. He pledged to revise controversial laws, open up political space, and he even condemned the abuses committed by his party and labeled it as an act of terrorism. So this has helped him get support from Oromos and even non-Oromo Ethiopians. His support grew internationally, and even the international community started putting their hope in him in transitioning the country. And that has led him to acquire Nobel Peace Prize award. He turned away from the demands of the Oromo people and started pleasing others with his speech and even actions. He turned against Oromo nationalism, which is the foundation of the Oromo struggle, and he started condemning it, saying Oromo nationalism reduced the great nation to a small neighborhood. So this has angered many Oromos. As he continued drifting away from the cause of the Oromo people, he started losing support with the same speed as he gained. To mention some examples, his statements such as Make Ethiopia Great Again, his actions against multinational federalism, his support for the Pan-Ethiopianists, and his allegiance for the Amara Prosperity Party at the cost of his constituency. And even his controversial definition of the peoples of Ethiopia, where he went further and said, there are no peoples in Ethiopia, only people. And this is contrary to the definition placed on the Ethiopian constitution. As he even went further and started backing his position with his actions, such as giving recognition to the past emperors such as Haile Selassie, Menelik, whom the Oromo majority hates for atrocities committed against their ancestors. He angered the Oromo intellectuals, politicians, and activists, including the ones that were supporting him. He even built statues for the emperors and placed them in the palace. So all these events were piled up and angered the Oromo people. And the other issue that pushed the Oromo people from putting their hopes in Abiy's administration is the government's crackdown on its opponents. In general, one can conclude that Abiy Ahmed is the first person that came out of nowhere and gained numerous support within a short period of time, and the first person that lost numerous support within the same short period of time. So currently, one should notice that the situation in Oromia seems like the situation that led to the start of students' movement back in 1970s as the underlying cause for the struggle of Oromo people, which led to the establishment of major opposition party, OLF.
That's very interesting breakdown of events, Ermias. So, how did all this lead to the election results that you said, okay, a gain for the PP is a loss for Oromia and Ethiopia? How did you get to that conclusion?
All these piled up events angered the Oromo people. That means his administration turned away from the Oromo people's demand. And again, the Oromo people were angry at the position his government has taken, which is against Oromo nationalism. And in Oromia, Oromos are aware of their identity and they are against anyone who comes against Oromo nationalism. So now the issue is that the conflicting narratives or the conflicting ideologies, Pan-Ethiopianism and Oromo nationalism, are colliding. Abiy's administration has lined up with the Pan-Ethiopianists, and in Oromia, people need at least multinational federalism because they want to promote their identity. If Prosperity Party wins, that means Oromia is going to lose and Ethiopia loses. The conflicting narratives and the government's crackdown on its opponents and the path that the government took, especially after the murder of Oromo musician Hachalu Hundesa, was against the demands of Oromo people. And we can say still now, this Prosperity Party has answered none of the demands that Oromo people sacrificed lives for. So, for example, the continued arrestings of politicians, the closing of opposition offices, and the closing of political landscape or political space. When we bring all these issues together, this party's win becomes a loss for Oromia because they didn't struggle or they didn't sacrifice that much for something that they call the worst.
I remember reading about OLF and Oromo Federalist Congress not even competing, so they boycotted the elections. Do they represent the Oromo voices? Oh, doesn't PP represent Oromo voice? Former OPDOs being Oromos, doesn't that give Oromos a voice?
So what we need to consider is that what Prosperity Party is, the ideology behind the Prosperity Party. For example, Abiy himself wrote an article saying, my party is the only party that is not ethnic based. That means there is no Oromo Prosperity Party. So the competition was Oromo Party versus Pan-Ethiopianists. So it was between the parties that run for the cause of the Oromo people and the Pan-Ethiopianists. When we say this, for example, both OLF and OFC enjoy large number of support in Oromia, and this is very obvious thing. We have seen many evidence showing they enjoy this support. So the competition was not during the election because during the election they haven't participated, and even Prosperity Party competed alone in more than 100 constituencies in Oromia. So the competition was before the election time. That means the Prosperity Party or the ruling party closed all the doors. From what we see, offices of the opposition parties were closed and most of opposition officials were arrested. So when we see this, the election result was even before these two parties boycotted.
So you mean it was predetermined before the election was even contested?
These parties reasoned out that the Prosperity Party or the ruling party blocked all their options. So they were forced to move out before the election day. That means they couldn't participate in the election. So what happens is that Prosperity Party's win becomes a loss for Oromia, as the people that support these prominent parties are not able to vote for the one they believe in.
So what we're seeing is, like as you put it, prominent Oromo parties who had large following among Oromos have been removed from the areas of the competition, leaving the space uncontested for Prosperity Party's win. That's what I'm understanding from what you said. So, just to wrap up, unless you have more things to say, where do we go from here? If it's a loss for Oromos and Prosperity has won every seat that Oromo parties could have won, where do we go from here? Where is the hope? What would happen after this election?
If we take this election, Prosperity Party has won, which even international community is not approving. But as we can see now in Oromia, this loss is not some sort of final loss. It even opened another door for resistance. If we see what is going on in Oromia since the ruling party or the government started cracking down against its opponents, this shows that it has opened the door for resistance. It went back to where the Oromo people's struggle started. Even the ones that promoted Abiy to get the Nobel Peace Prize are now against his administration.
So, through elections, hopes are dashed, but there is hope in other forms of struggle. But where does that leave this country? I mean, I understand where all the political space is closed down and every voice of dissent is crushed. All the Oromo leaders, prominent Oromo leaders, are in prison. This is the closing down of political space. I understand that. Where does that leave the people within the political domains of Ethiopia? Where does that leave Oromos?
So currently, all the options were closed, and what happens is civil war, but might even push for the disintegration of Ethiopia. Because, for example, every opposition parties, international institutions were pushing for all-inclusive national dialogue, but the government did not even give ear to these recommendations. So we can say that the country is running towards disintegration.
So it was hoped that Ethiopia would transition to a semblance of democracy in the last 3 years, but the transition has been derailed, is the consensus now. So that all-inclusive national dialogue is a way out of this crisis, I think. So I think that's the sense I'm getting from you as well. But if you have a final word around that, could you say, and then we can wrap up.
So as I've mentioned before, international institutions, countries, and prominent Oromo opposition parties called for a dialogue, all-inclusive national dialogue. But what we have been seeing is the government is not considering these recommendations. Now, if all-inclusive national dialogue is not going to take place, it might even be too late to solve this issue even through national dialogue. This means it might be a solution, but it might also be too late.
Let's keep our hope that all inclusive national dialogue with everybody who has a stake in that country will happen sooner than later, and the country will hold together. Let's leave it with that optimistic hope. And I just want to say thank you so much for all the insights and for your conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.